The Sheikah, as probably the most tragic race and civilization in the Zelda series, remains to this day a mystery. How did this enigmatic people become the most trusted guardians of the goddess Hylian and the royal family? And what caused the rise and tragic downfall in the unified timeline? To get the answers and crack the mysteries tied to this dark and enshrouded in secrecy tribe, we need to get back to the beginning of the history of Hyrule.
It's believed that the Sheikah were among the ancient tribes who settled the surface long after the golden goddesses Din, Nehru and Faror had created the world, and upon departing, bestowed her grace goddess Hylia with their holy relic, the Triforce. With this great power at hand, the goddesses needed a people to populate and govern the land, and another race to protect her and the Triforce from falling into the wrong hands. Similarly to the humans, the Sheikah stood out from the rest of the tribes as being a humanoid chosen race by goddess Hylia. The task given to them was very simple: serve and protect her grace from any danger. The Sheikah became the protectors of the world, the goddess's military forces, mastering any battle skill and wielding all kinds of sorcery including dark magic, granting them powers unmatched by any. With this destiny at hand, it's likely to assume that the race cultivated a warrior or militaristic lifestyle where they lived amongst the humans with a goddess in peace and prosperity.
But the question comes up: why did a goddess need protection to begin with? The answer is short and simple. The relic bestowed to Hylia by the Golden Goddesses was also cursed to attract the attention of demons who seek to claim it for evil intentions. One dark, fateful day, the earth cracked wide and demons rushed forth from the fissure. Under the leadership of the Demon King Demise, they invaded the world and unleashed an unmatched ambush of ferocity, murdering anyone who fell in their hands without hesitation. The war that followed caused great casualties to the people of the surface, who was about to wipe out the entire unarmed human population when the goddess decided to intervene. She gathered all remaining humans on a crop of land outside of her temple and sent the survivors along with the goddess statue and the Triforce skyward. The remaining surface tribes and the goddess united their forces and braced for the decisive confrontation against the Demise. Among them were the Sheikah warriors. As the chosen guards of the goddess and the only one possessing true combat skills and magical abilities, they were hell-bent on defending and protecting her grace from any threats.
The battle was long and fierce, causing devastating losses to both sides. At some point, the Sheikah warriors' defences could not hold back anymore, and the demonic hordes with Demise at the front rushed at the goddess, managing to inflict grave injuries on her grace. Fortunately, the tide of battle turned, and the 5 races under the command of the goddess managed to regroup and defeat the hordes and subsequently seal away Demise in the hole where the statue of the goddess once stood. Being aware that the seal was just temporary, the wounded goddess decided to give up her immortality and transfer her soul to the body of a mortal. Upon leaving the surface though, she ordered one of the Sheikah, Impa, the chosen one, to watch over the seal and use a gate of time to travel into the future in order to protect her eventual incarnation. After reuniting with the incarnated goddess at the Earth Temple, she took care of Zelda and travelled from the Temple of Time's Gate of Time in the present to the sealed grounds in the past, making sure that she was sealed away from Girium's clutches. There, she waited for the moment Zelda would be able to leave the seal while guiding the chosen hero in both her youth and final moments to bring down the goddess statue. This was all a part of a greater plan of the goddess to bring the sacred realm back to the surface, crushing Demise in the process. Eventually, Zelda left the time capsule and was reunited with Impa and the hero of the sky. Nonetheless, they had all forgotten about Giriam, who in a matter of minutes trolled everyone, easily took down the old and weakened Impa, Groose and Zelda, and brought the mortal incarnation of Hylia with him to the distant past. In a final confrontation in the past, Link defeated Giriam and Demise in the past, but was cursed by Demise's final words and blood to repeat this cycle of reincarnation with no end. Impa then revealed why she couldn't return back to the future with Groose, the hero of the sky, and Zelda. Someone must stay behind to watch over this blade. His spirit must not reawaken. He must never be allowed to threaten the world again. This is the nature of the task given to me. As a member of the Sheikah, the goddess's chosen guardians, I gladly welcome this duty.
Back in the future, Link, Groose and Zelda were witness to the passing of old Impa, and shortly after made a decision to settle down on the surface. The rest of the inhabitants of Skyloft soon followed the lead, but at the same time, what happened with the Sheikah after Impa's death? Since in the era of the sky when the humans lived and prospered high up in Skyloft, the surface was cultivated and maintained by the remaining Sheikah warriors. This state changed at an instant when the humans returned to the surface and set to reclaim the land with the Triforce in their grip. Still, the return of the goddess in the form of a mortal must have had a positive impact, as it is chronicled in Hyrule Historia and Ocarina of Time that the Sheikah swore allegiance to Zelda as guardians and maidens chosen by the goddess upon her sacrifice for the greater good. A period of stability and peace followed, where the uncivilized surface was transformed into the land of Hyrule. The land was renamed in honor of the goddess, and the humans became Hylians, Hylia's people. In the reign of peace, stability and prosperity, a new settlement and stronghold sprung up. The Hylians erected a settlement at the center of the world at the sealed grounds, while the Sheikah built their own hidden village, Kakariko.
Peace would, however, turn out to be temporary, as the almighty Triforce in the Sacred Realm remained a target for greedy individuals and groups seeking to claim it for their own interests. An era of chaos loomed in the distance over the control of the Triforce, but more unexpectedly, the Sheikah Guardians would be involved in that war against Hylians. It's likely to presume that far from all members of the Sheikah tribe were fond of the idea that the humans returning to the surface and reclaiming the reign over it. This was due to the fact that over the course of several generations the land had been under the Sheikah's protection. Thus, some of them must have been reluctant to simply hand over the control to the all too powerful Hylians, who, in their eyes, had claimed the Triforce for themselves, as it was one of their members who awoke as the reincarnated Hylia. What must have followed was likely an internal conflict among the Sheikah, which eventually led to the first split of the tribe into two factions. The insurrectionists, or interlopers, wielding dark magic, the fused shadow, and determined to put an end to Hylian supremacy by taking the Triforce away from them. And the loyalists.
The harm was done, and the loyalist faction was forced to leave Kakariko by the insurrectionists. This action left the loyalists without a home and would in the near future result in the founding of a new Sheikah village, bearing the same name of the old one. Meanwhile, the insurrectionist Sheikah decided that the only way to claim the Triforce was through the means of dark magic, and utilizing the fused shadow to seal the relic away from the Hylians. They were plotting the invasion of the Sacred Realm. An action which would mark the outbreak of the Interloper War, the first Sheikah insurrection. As the invasion was launched, a great battle ensued where the Hylians and the different tribes fought over the control of the Sacred Realm. The battle went on, but soon the opposing forces realized that it was impossible to withstand the Sheikah insurrectionists, who had the fused shadow at their disposal. They retreated. It seemed as the battle was over and the Sheikah insurrectionists had been victorious in establishing dominion over the Sacred Realm and the Triforce, efficiently sealing it away from the Hylians and other races' tribes. But the insurrectionists had forgotten about one important detail. The Hylians were granted the Triforce by the goddess.
As a result, the Golden Goddesses ordered the light spirits Faron, Eldin and Lanayru to intervene and seal away the fused shadow, thus exposing the Sheikah insurrectionists, or interlopers, to the wrath of the Hylians and other races. What followed was the first Sheikah exodus, where the Sheikah interlopers were driven away from the land of Hyrule to the desert, where they were banished to the Twilight Realm. How did we get to this conclusion? Well, in Twilight Princess, the Palace of Twilight had several Sheikah symbols displayed, and the Prison Cape Zelda War during the Twilight Crisis did as well bear the Sheikah tearing eye mark. These two references make it more than obvious that the Twili indeed derived from the insurrectionists or Interloper Sheikah, who were members of the original tribe that betrayed the Hyrulean royal family in order to seal away the Sacred Realm and the Triforce from being abused.
Moreover, the outcome of the war could be much more impactful than previously believed. Because, whether we like it or not, the downfall and tragedy of the Sheikah insurrectionist interlopers led to the creation and rise of the Kingdom of Hyrule with Hylia's descendants as its royal family. Remarkably, this objection fits with the placement and description given in Hyrule Historia, as this was the same time frame when the Sacred Realm was sealed through the Light Sage Raori's construction of the Temple of Time, which was subsequently followed by the construction of Hyrule Castle, marking the establishment of Hyrule Kingdom. A new era of prosperity was on the horizon. With the insurrectionists gone, the remaining Sheikah could rebuild their trust and close relation to the Hylians and royal family. One of the members was once again designated and chosen to be the maidens and guardians of the mortal incarnations of the goddess. The same can be said about the loyalist Sheikah, who had recently begun the construction of a new capital with a giant windmill as its centerpiece landmark. At the same time, the place had a more somber and dark aura hanging over it that reflected the culture of mystery and recent tragic past. Even so, to give final resting place to the Sheikah guardians and the members of the Hyrulean royal family, a graveyard was set up, and behind it they constructed the Shadow Temple and catacombs where the fallen Sheikah insurrectionists were soon after buried. It is from these times that the Sheikah became known as the Shadow Folk, and the fascination for the shadows and the dead became an important part of their culture.
Little is known about the tribe's role in between the Interloper War and the Hyrulean Civil War, as there is no chronicle sources referencing them in the entire Force era. Nonetheless, in the next couple of generations, it's likely to assume that the Sheikah developed a rich and unique cultural heritage that was displayed in the new capital. What began as a simple tribe of guardians and sorceresses was about to grow into a proper civilization that in certain regards surpassed the achievements of their Hylian counterparts. It's likely that it was in these eras of relative peace and prosperity that the three holy magic relics, the Lens of Truth, the Mask of Truth, and the Stone or Shard of Agony, making up the Trinity of Truths, along with the hover boots, were crafted. Still, for what we know, there could have been much more artifacts, which later disappeared or were destroyed during the Hyrulean Civil War. One artifact that actually survived the war and scattered around was the magical Gossip Stone, which served to reveal secret information by piercing messages into the receiver's mind when wearing the Mask of Truth. At the same time, the missing records from this lengthy time gap could indicate that the Sheikah, apart from serving as the guardians of the goddess's incarnation, were rather isolationist in the entire Force era. The Nintendo Player's Guide for Ocarina of Time, which states that the contact between the races was for a long time reduced and first brought up again the Hero of Time, supports this. It appears that until the outbreak of the Civil War, the Sheikah put all their effort on maintaining their peaceful way of life and expanding all aspects of Kakariko's social and political culture.
Several eras passed, and the Sheikah continued to thrive and evolve as a civilization. Unfortunately, old hatred was once again about to resurface, as a new king of Hyrule set his aim on expanding his territory through conquest and unifying the different tribal states under one banner and monarch. At the same time, two prominent Sheikah members were born and raised in the village, the wizard Bongo-Bongo and the new Impa. A decision like no other faced the Sheikah. Would they let their domain fall under the absolute rule and command of the Kingdom of Hyrule, or take to arms and fight for their independence and self-governance? It is likely that the Sheikah, faced by this ultimatum, once again split up into rebel and loyalist factions. Only this time, the insurrectionists could also be seen as patriots, who seek support from other tribes in an attempt to halt the unification and vassalization of the sovereign tribal states of Hyrule. The Loyalists, on the other hand, supported the royal family in the cause for unification. Tensions rose between the two as the rebels managed to get the Gerudo tribe to join the cause for independence from the Hyrulean crown. It was just a matter of time until a bloody civil war would break out in Kakariko and the rest of Hyrule.
The civil war broke out as female Gerudo warriors arrived in the village and together with the Sheikah insurrectionists massacred close to all Sheikah loyalists in the first battle for Kakariko. Then the rest of them were brought to the Shadow Temple, tortured and finally executed and buried for their loyalty to the Hyrulean royal family. One of the loyalist leaders, Impa, was not present in the village when the bloodbath was carried out, but the news soon reached her at Hyrule Castle. She swore to redeem the Sheikah loyalists and was hell-bent on taking up the battle against the Sheikah rebels and the Gerudo forces. This claim is supported by the fact that the Nintendo's official player's guide for Ocarina of Time states that the Gerudo were stationed at Kakariko during the Civil War and driven out by Impa. The Hyrulean Civil War had broken out with two central factions. The Unification alliance consisting of the united forces of the King of Hyrule, the Gorons, the Zora, and any remaining Sheikah loyalist forces such as Impa, against the Sovereignty Coalition of the Sheikah insurrectionists or rebels and the Gerudo tribe. War raged throughout Hyrule for many years as the two factions clashed in several indecisive battles, leaving countless of the greatest knights and inhabitants dead, many more refugees, homeless, and entire settlements in ruins.
It would take many years until the Alliance gained a decisive victory when an offense led by Impa, as referenced in the Nintendo official player's guide, reclaimed Kakriko Village from the Gerudo and the insurrectionist forces, inflicting devastating losses for the Sovereignty Coalition in the process. The Gerudo forces were thrown out of the village, and soon after, the King of Thieves, Ganondorf, swore allegiance to the King of Hyrule and betrayed the Sheikah rebels and left them exposed for the Unification Alliance's wrath. A cruel act of retaliation was about to be carried out in the Alliance's fury against the remaining Sheikah rebels. They were brought in large numbers by the Hylians to the Shadow Temple, where they were tortured, executed, and finally buried for the treason against the royal family. The temple was chosen for their death site, as this was where the Hyrulean soldiers, knights and the Sheikah loyalists during the Civil War were brought as prisoners of war, just to be interrogated, tortured and finally executed and sacrificed. While this war crime took place, Impa, the loyalist commander, tortured and finally executed the insurrectionist leader and wizard Bongo-Bongo by embodying his head and arms in the depths of the village.
The tragedy of the Sheikah tribe and civilization was complete, as close to no individuals apart from Impa were left after the final genocide of the race. The Hylians in Impa soon realised the need to cover up all traces of this hideous crime. The genocide of the Sheikah could not be discovered. As a result, a thick wall requiring Din's fire to enter was set up to seal the entrance to the Shadow Temple. The corridor leading to the catacomb was partially dismantled and required the use of the longshot to pass. The Shadow Temple, once a place of memory and worship, had now turned into a shameful chapter of the history of Hyrule. Before leaving the Shadow Temple for what she believed was her last time, Impa left a message to anyone who had wandered the catacombs. Shadow Temple, here is gathered Hyrule's history of greed and hatred. Next, the house of the insurrectionist leader was dismantled, a well set up in its place, and the lens of truth hidden in the depths of it. Impa moved permanently out of Kakariko Village to Hyrule Castle. Not long after this, she opened the abandoned and empty village for other races and less affluent Hylians to settle, putting an efficient end to the history of the Sheikah civilization and their once proud capital.
The war was over and the self-governed tribal states were unified under one banner and monarch. Kakariko was incorporated into the Kingdom of Hyrule. Hylians repopulated the village and soon after soldiers were guarding the place. Even so, the war veteran Impa never forgot about the place she was born and raised, and after a few years she ordered a group of carpenters to rebuild the village and transform it into a true city. But the aging Impa was the only one who believed Princess Zelda's vision about the looming threat from Ganondorf, and taught the young hero of time Zelda's lullaby. In the wake of Ganondorf's coup d'etat, she single-handedly organized the princess' escape from the castle and defended Kakriko Village from Ganondorf's inevitable attack, thus saving it from certain destruction. Over the next 7 years, Impa raised and taught Zelda the Sheikah way of life, and made a warrior man out of her. In this time, it is likely that they built a mother and daughter-like relation.
This could be supported by the fact that Adult Zelda's tabard, beside the Triforce and Loftwing, depicts the Sheikah coat of arms, the Tearing Eye, a sign and symbol which might point to Impa accepting Zelda as a proper member of her tribe, and granting her the name Sheik. This way, Zelda or Sheik could return to Hyrule disguised as a member of the tribe to wait for the return of the Hero of Time. With Zelda/Sheik able to take care of herself, she returned back to Kakariko, which, after the destruction of Castletown, had become the main settlement of Hyrule. Nonetheless, Ganondorf's present had set the evil spirit of Bongo-Bongo free from his seal, forcing Impa for one last time to enter the Shadow Temple in order to imprison him once again. Ultimately, she was with the Hero of Time's assistance, awakened as the Sage of Shadows. The aging Impa from the era of the Hero of Time was the last proper Sheikah who was born, raised and taught by the principles of the pre-war civilization and their militaristic traditions. Unfortunately, as a consequence of the Sheikah genocide, the tribe was left with only a handful of individuals and the most influential member of the tribe, Impa, aging each passing year. It was unavoidable that the bloodline of the race quickly began to dwindle after the timeline split following the decisive battle between Ganondorf and the Hero of Time. As centuries passed by, close to all traces of the Sheikah were wiped out.
In the downfall timeline, the different descendants of Impa were the only remnants of the Sheikah race, as they appeared in the era of Dark and Light, the Golden Era and the Era of Decline. In the adult timeline, the Sheikah are extinct by the time of the Great Flood and the creation of the Great Sea, while in the child timeline it is presumed only a few Sheikah remain as Impa had a descendant and continue to serve the Hyrulean royal family and lead the forces throughout the lengthy Gerudo-Hylian war. Moreover, traces found in the Twilight Era point at both Castletown and Kakariko being left in ruins after Ganondorf and his army stormed and occupied the settlement. This caused a wave of hiding refugees with an urgent need of shelter, which subsequently forced Impa to reopen the ancient Sheikah settlement, which was abandoned after the Interloper war, and founded a new village on its ruins. This one was fittingly called Old Kakariko and marked with a sign at the entrance to the village. After the war was concluded, the construction of a new castle town commenced. Old Kakariko was no longer needed and soon after abandoned with only Impa's descendants guarding the place. Beside Impa's, one other Sheikah, Madame Fanadi, appeared to be still around in the Twilight Era. On top of this, you obviously have the Twili, the descendants of the first Sheikah insurrectionists who were banished into the Twilight Realm. In the Twilight Era, Midna and the self-proclaimed king of Twilight Zant returned to their ascendant's Hyrule for a limited time. Throughout this invasion, Zant saw the land of Hyrule as a homeland, an alternative future that was taken away from his people. It appears that the inhabitants of the Twilight Realm never forgot about their former homeland and Sheikah identity, as they kept the Tearing Eye as their tribal symbol. These could be witnessed throughout the Palace of Twilight, and specifically in the throne room of the palace. The connection between the two parallel worlds was however short-lived, as Zant and the resurrected Ganondorf were defeated by the Hero of Twilight, and the Twilight Princess Midna dismantled the Mirror of Twilight upon leaving Hyrule. With Impa's aging with no descendants, the Sheikah must have shortly after died out in the child timeline, efficiently ending the history of the tribe.
Summing up, the history of the Sheikah tribe is a tale of tragedy and a race that could have had a completely different outcome, but ended with the annihilation of the civilization in Hyrule, with the only tribal remains banished into the Twilight Realm. what looked like a promising prospect for the race in the era of the goddess and the era of the sky as the chosen guardians of her grace, and her later mortal incarnations that turned into deadly splits that caused abuse of their magical sorcery powers, exoduses, and finally the genocide and near extinction of the race. The Sheikah stood next to the Hylians for centuries, but as they were not willing to accept the Hylians' desire to conquer and control the Triforce, they conducted 2 severe acts of treason against the family they swore allegiance to. In the end, the Sheikah valued personal freedom, independence and self-governance highest, but the lack of unity within the tribe made them vulnerable, causing them to pay the ultimate price, and their downfall as a people. The Interloper War and the Civil War left the tribe in ruins, with only a handful of survivors. The Tearing Eye is indeed a fitting testimony to the terrible fate that met this race in the unified timeline. Hey guys, this is Zeltik. I hope you enjoyed this special episode of History Time, as it took us an eternity to develop this one for you. On the right, I've got 2 further suggestions. The first is the Kakariko Wii U episode we did together for the first season of Zelda Unknown, or the Castletown season finale of the same series. And of course, don't forget to subscribe.